Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or their guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's May 28th, and we have a lot to talk about. Last week, I was in Copenhagen, Denmark, for an important meeting of the Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee. And in a moment, I'm going to give you an update on that meeting. Today, I'm on my way to Seattle, Washington, for the Consortium of Multiple Sclerosis Centers annual meeting. The Consortium of Multiple Sclerosis Centers, or CMSC meeting, is one of the largest clinical MS conferences in the world. So beginning tomorrow and continuing all week long, you can expect bonus episodes of Real Talk MS directly from the CMSC conference. And before we dive into last week's Progressive MS Alliance meeting, I want to give you one final reminder that you have just 4 days left to visit the Real Talk MS website, submit the story of your MS journey, and you might be my special guest on our 100th episode, which is coming up fast. By now, I know you've heard me say that I see this podcast as a two-way conversation. And so many of you have been great when it comes to your side of the conversation, whether you've sent me a suggestion about a topic that you'd like to hear more about, or offered your feedback on a specific episode of the podcast. Well, I thought what might make our 100th episode of Real Talk MS really special is if I had a conversation with someone from our listener community. So if you have a story about your MS journey or an interesting perspective on MS that you'd like to share, then I think you and I should talk. All you have to do is visit realtalkms.com/enter, and I'll include that link in today's show notes, and share some information about what you'd like to talk about during our interview. You only have until May 31st to get your entry in, and I'll announce the episode 100 special guest winner next week on the June 4th episode of Real Talk MS. Then we'll get an interview scheduled so that you can share the story of your MS journey. So please consider this your personal invitation to head over to realtalkms.com/enter and let me know what you'd like to talk about on our 100th episode. What I'd like to talk about on this episode of the podcast is last week's Progressive MS Alliance Scientific Steering Committee meeting in Copenhagen. And if you're a longtime listener, you've heard me talk about the Progressive MS Alliance before. But our listener community is continuing to grow, and we're growing by a lot. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with the International Progressive MS Alliance, I want to give you a little background and context, because the Alliance is changing the game when it comes to progressive MS research. The most succinct way that I can describe the Progressive MS Alliance is to say that it's an unprecedented and unparalleled global effort to understand and treat progressive MS. The Alliance was founded in 2013 by the National MS Society in the United States, the MS Society of Canada, the MS Society of the UK, the Italian MS Society, MS Research Australia, and the MS International Federation. Since its founding, multiple sclerosis societies from Denmark, Finland, Belgium, France, Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, Norway, Spain, and Sweden have also become members, because I think everyone recognizes a good idea, and the Alliance is a very good idea. The structure of the Progressive MS Alliance is very simple. The executive committee is made up of the CEOs of the 6 MS organizations that founded the Alliance. It's a decision-making body for the Alliance, and they handle planning, budgeting, scientific review, research funding, and fundraising. The industry forum is the venue for the pharmaceutical and biotech industries to provide advice and make recommendations to the Alliance, as well as contribute financial support toward the Alliance's research initiatives. And the Scientific Steering Committee guides the scientific direction and activities of the Alliance. The Scientific Steering Committee is made up of the best and brightest scientific minds in the world. And for the past 3 years, it's been my honor to be one of the 3 non-scientist members of the Scientific Steering Committee. Our role is to represent the perspective and experience of people affected by progressive MS. We have full voting privileges on the committee, and I can say without hesitation that our participation is invited, our opinions are solicited, our suggestions are acted upon, and our voices are heard in all of the Scientific Steering Committee's work. The Scientific Steering Committee has 3 very straightforward priorities that are designed to fuel discoveries for new progressive MS treatments and to improve the lives of people living with progressive MS. The 3 priorities are to better understand MS progression, to accelerate clinical trials, and to enhance well-being. We fund transformational global research. We convene scientific summits to share knowledge and stimulate further discovery. And we collaborate with regulatory agencies like the FDA and the European Medicines Agency, with MS pharmaceutical experts and leading research scientists in other disease areas, because collaboration and knowledge sharing get you to the finish line faster. So now that you're up to speed on how the Progressive MS Alliance is structured and what its goals and priorities are, let me take you inside last week's meeting because, as I said at the very beginning of our podcast, this was a particularly important meeting. 2 years ago, the Progressive MS Alliance awarded 3 multi-year grants totaling about $14 million to 3 international networks of researchers and institutions who would develop projects that had the potential to make real breakthroughs in understanding and treating progressive MS. Now, we've talked about these research projects before. One is focused on identifying biomarkers for progressive MS through MRI analysis before disease progression can even be identified by a physician during a clinic visit, which means that proactive treatment could start sooner. And just as a refresher, a biomarker is a measurable entity or element in our body that's indicative of some phenomenon such as disease, infection, or environmental exposure. For instance, a high level of white blood cells is a fluid biomarker for infection. And this particular project is focused on cutting-edge science that's being leveraged to analyze an MRI scan in the hopes of identifying an imaging biomarker for progressive MS. The other 2 research projects are focused on using sophisticated, cutting-edge techniques to develop new drug treatments for progressive MS. Well, last week in Copenhagen, we brought all 3 international research teams together to present detailed updates of their work. And I want to share as much as I can with you about what was discussed. And I say that I want to share as much as I can because this meeting was understandably held under a really strict and rigid non-disclosure agreement. The reason for the non-disclosure agreement is because these research projects are ongoing. The research teams haven't completed their work, and so obviously they haven't published their results. There were new discoveries that were being announced last week, and these discoveries haven't even been patented. So in order to protect the intellectual property associated with these projects, all of the attendees were required to sign non-disclosure agreements. So I can't share everything, but I can share some things from this meeting. First off, I can give you more detail about the projects themselves. One of the 2 drug discovery research projects is being led by Professor Gianvito Martino from Italy. Professor Martino's team includes investigators from Italy, France, Germany, Canada, and the United States, and the team is working to identify drug agents that might protect nerve cells or promote myelin repair. Using very sophisticated software, the team has identified 500 potential drugs to investigate, and their initial analysis and modeling narrowed their focus to 73 different drugs. The team's use of bioinformatics to identify drug candidates is a new innovation, and their progress to date indicates that we can expect some significant advances as their work continues. Now, the second research project is being led by Professor Francisco Quintana from Brigham Women's and Children's Hospital in the United States, and Professor Quintana's team includes investigators from the U.S., Canada, Israel, and drug company Sanofi Genzyme. This team is focused on the innate immune system, and they're working to identify drug candidates that may be effective in treating progressive MS. Now, the innate immune system normally functions to protect us from infections, but Dr. Quintana and others have found that innate immune cells in the nervous system promote disease activity in multiple sclerosis. The team has identified a specific cell pathway where an intervention could potentially block the destructive properties of these rogue innate immune cells. The team is testing potential drug agents that it could effectively provide that intervention. The research team is also examining a specific compound that they've discovered that could protect the brain from damage. And last week, Dr. Quintana and his team provided some very encouraging results. So my fingers are crossed as they continue to do their work. And while I'd love to be more specific, what I can say is that the good news is there actually is real progress being made here. The third of the three research projects isn't focused on drug development. The team is doing pioneering work on developing highly sophisticated imaging tools and computer programs that will predict changes in the brain as MS progresses. These tools could be used to evaluate whether a potential treatment is effective in slowing or reversing damage in the brain. And this project is being led by Professor Doug Arnold from Canada. And Professor Arnold's team includes investigators from Canada, the Netherlands, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The team has already assembled data from over 9,000 people that include more than 50,000 MRI scans. Getting an overview from this team was kind of like watching science fiction become science fact. All three of these projects represent potential breakthrough science. And if you're someone who's affected by progressive MS, I can tell you without question that the progress being made is real, and there's every reason to feel very positive about the direction that things are heading. And while last week's meeting focused on these three research projects, there were also presentations and discussions centered around the Progressive MS Alliance's new initiatives. To expand the work of the Alliance in understanding progression and accelerating the development of new treatments for progressive MS, the Alliance has launched a data sharing initiative that will leverage the power of analyzing big data or huge amounts of data from completed clinical trials that could reveal new insights into progressive MS. Another initiative is focused on designing innovative experimental clinical trials. Clinical trials are the path to new drug treatments being made available, but they're very slow and incredibly expensive. This initiative will examine designing smarter trials and identifying mechanisms involved in MS progression as a means toward creating faster clinical trials. Another new initiative involves accelerating work to discover a fluid biomarker for progressive MS. Just imagine if a simple blood test could determine if a particular MS treatment was effective in preventing nerve damage for people living with MS. And one more initiative is focused on creating a global research strategy for enhancing well-being that's going to improve the quality of life for people living with progressive MS. Now, the Scientific Steering Committee has created international teams of experts to focus on each of these ambitious initiatives. And it became clear at last week's meeting that the work of the Alliance is already producing significant scientific discovery, while at the same time, the work is continuing to grow as the Alliance expands its focus into new areas of importance to people affected by progressive MS. And the last thing I want to tell you about is that this meeting also reflected the Progressive MS Alliance's determined effort to incorporate the voices of people affected by progressive MS. We added 5 new people who are living with progressive MS to the teams that are focused on implementing the Alliance's new initiatives. Our new team members come from Canada, Australia, Italy, Denmark, and Morocco. And they're going to join us in implementing these new initiatives, as well as in communicating the work of the Alliance in their own countries. If it sounds like there was a lot going on at this meeting, well, it's because there was. And I guess I'll add that you're getting the very first briefing anywhere in the world about the amazing work that's being done through the International Progressive MS Alliance. Anytime I'm at one of our scientific steering committee meetings and I look around the room, it's impossible not to be reminded that MS is a disease that doesn't respect borders. So it's a disease that requires a global response, and an organization that's providing leadership in that global response is the Multiple Sclerosis International Federation, or MSIF. And since World MS Day is this Thursday, May 30th, I was especially happy to spend time with my friend Pierre Beneke, the CEO of the Multiple Sclerosis International Federation, and we had a chance to talk all about World MS Day. So in a moment, you'll have a chance to hear all about World MS Day from my guest, the CEO of the Multiple Sclerosis International Federation, Pierre Beneke. The nice thing about being at an International Progressive MS Alliance meeting is that you actually get to meet face to face with a lot of the people that, well, if you're me, that you wish you had the chance to meet face to face with more often. Today I'm talking with Pierre Beneke, the CEO of the Multiple Sclerosis International Federation, or the MSIF. World MS Day is this Thursday, May 30th, and it's one of the biggest and certainly one of the most visible campaigns that the MSIF is involved in. Pierre and I had a great conversation about the MSIF last year, so welcome back to the podcast, Pierre.
Thank you. Pleased to be here.
Before we get into World MS Day, can you give our listeners an idea of what the Multiple Sclerosis International Federation is all about?
Yeah, well, we'll basically call ourselves the International MS Global Movement because we are a collection of national MS organizations, patient organizations, from the largest to the smallest around the world. And it is all about collaboration and doing the fight in the realm of MS together. So that's in stimulating the research, collaborating on the research like in the Alliance. It is about creating the awareness together and piggyback on what the best society does, the best organization used it somewhere else in the world, and learn from each other. So it's also in advocating. For example, at the moment, we've put a proposal to the World Health Organization together to have 3 drugs on a so-called essential medicine list they've made, which is a list which is used mostly in resource-poor countries, but every government should have those drugs on that list in their arsenal. So we're doing things together, and that's what it's all about. So our role as MSIF is to be the oil in that movement, is to help people work together, and it also is to help those organizations in countries where there is very little. So we support organizations, particularly in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Africa, Eastern Europe, so less well-resourced countries, and so that there as well the MS organizations and the patient organizations can grow and develop.
So about how many countries are you involved in now?
We are probably involved in around 100 countries, and World MS Day, we expect, will take place in 100 countries. But in fact, the many organizations, World MS Day is for any organization, any person with or affected by MS. World MS Day is for them. So anywhere in the world, do participate.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. So what is World MS Day all about?
Now, World MS Day, now we've done it for 10 years. And we launched it really to mobilize the world, to mobilize people with and affected by MS, mobilize the organizations, create awareness, advocate, fundraise. So all these things. And it is something where it's both the organizations that take it up in every country, but it's also people independently of that. So you don't need to be a member of an organization or be a supporter of an organization. You can go on the World MS Day website and find things to do.
I know that this year the theme of World MS Day is My Invisible MS, and I think anyone in the MS community knows about the invisible elements, the invisible side of MS. But what does that mean, or how does that translate into what World MS Day is all about this year?
Yes, so we have a hashtag, My Invisible MS, and the campaign is really to give people with MS, and in fact, people affected by MS may want to get into the act as well, but to communicate their invisible symptoms. So we've created a set of tools, posters. We've created funny screens which you can put over your face, over a photograph, to symbolize a particular symptom you may have. And you can use that to communicate either to the broader public or to your friends or your family what that invisible symptom is.
What are some of the ways that people can get involved? You mentioned that World MS Day has its own website. Where is that website, and what can they be up to, and what can they be doing?
Yes. So the website is worldmsday.org, and the hashtag is MyInvisibleMS. And so, for example, you can go on there, and there is a so-called poster maker. So you can make a poster about yourself. You can write text on there. You can create these screens, which I said, where you can get those invisible MS poster overlay, which symbolizes those particular symptoms. And then we're talking about fatigue. We're talking about pain. You know which symptoms there are, and you can find a screen for most of those.
I know it can be difficult for people who aren't living with MS or don't know anyone living with MS to really appreciate how, while those invisible symptoms might be invisible, they have a powerful impact on someone's quality of life. So thank you and your entire team at the MSIF for working so hard to raise awareness of MS by helping people understand what it is, how it impacts millions of families around the world. World MS Day is May 30th, and while it may only be a day, I know that your work continues year-round to make events like World MS Day so successful. So thank you, Pierre, and thanks for taking the time to talk with me today.
My pleasure.
Well, that's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Remember, this is your final reminder. You only have 4 days left to get your entry in to be my special guest on Real Talk MS episode number 100. Take just a couple of minutes today and let me know why you'd be the perfect special guest for me to interview on our 100th episode. Please head over to realtalkms.com/enter, and you and I might be having a conversation soon on the 100th episode of Real Talk MS. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.